Today, Democrats are highlighting that the bill is not just unpopular from some liberal or centrist perspective, but that it is fundamentally flawed, some say amoral, and thus they say this is still a chance, the delay in the House, for people to come to their senses.
Don't tell me you give a shit about the middle class when all you're doing is shitting on the middle class.
Vice President said these cuts are immaterial.
This bill is a deal with the devil.
Mitch McConnell says people will get over it.
There's a special place in hell for people who take food away from veterans.
Joni Ernst reminded us we're all going to die anyway.
You should be ashamed.
Democrats fighting hard, saying this is a moral issue, and really pinpointing one of those key issues. There's a lot in this bill. There's a lot of ways you could come at it. We've heard Republicans' concerns about it, but you're hearing here in sort of the closing argument, the bottom of the ninth, Democrats trying to remind everyone just how much this bill goes after health care. Democratic leader Jeffries is calling for any Republican somewhere, he says, to summon the independence, the political courage of Republicans of years past.
So all we need are 4 Republicans to join us in support of their constituents, to have John McCain level courage and stand up in defense of the health care of the American people.
Senator McCain was famously conservative. He was a hawk. But let's put this in full and remind people, if you guys can see this, we got the video from our control room. We're spotlighting what was that moment when he put his thumbs down at another pivotal time in 2017, having crossed and clashed with the Trump administration, and there really risking his entire political standing with his party because he said that was the right thing to do. You can see him walking up and voting down what was then an effort to gut Obamacare. We're joined now by James Carville, who may be old enough to remember that moment. There's lessons in history, James. Your view on both what it means that it may be stalling momentarily and the Democrats' argument there.
Well, there are lessons in history, and I want to go back to 1983 when Michael Foot, the head of the Labor Party, penned what is known as the longest suicide note in history. It was 40 pages long. This is 25 times longer. This is now the largest suicide note in history. This is going to be the most unpopular piece of legislation you can imagine. It's not just unpopular with Democrats and independents. It's unpopular with a fair amount of Republicans. And if you look at it, it's a net 25 underwater now. So it's not going to do anything with first, but they want to write a suicide note. They want to jump. Let them jump. You don't even have to shove them. You can just watch. They're going over the cliff on this. It's pretty clear.
You're saying Republicans going politically over the cliff because, first and foremost, of the health care cuts?
Oh, the veteran stuff is just god-awful. And then when you start, and every time you turn something else, you find out this thing is 1,000 pages long. The journalists and the analysts have not uncovered everything in this. We're just starting to find out everything, and we're going to find out more as we go along. But the big thing is this cuts taxes. Maybe Jeff Bezos needs a 4-day wedding, not a 3-day wedding. Poor guy, he'll be able to easily afford that going forward. This is a singularly bad piece of legislation. It's unpopular. The American people have figured it out, and these Republicans know it. They know what they're getting into, and they just don't feel like they have another choice. But this is not going away, I promise you.
Yeah, and there's plenty of folks, including in conservative areas, that are very concerned and opposing what you're saying. They're going to go off the cliff, but opposing the Medicaid cuts. Take a look.
State officials say if cuts and changes are made, about 300,000 people are at risk of losing coverage.
300 hospitals across the country at risk of closing if cuts are made to Medicaid.
As many as 200,000 Georgians could lose Medicaid coverage.
This is our medication that without the Medicaid coverage would be $3,200 a month because our primary insurance has denied us.
Really is the difference from us being able to stay afloat versus going in the red.
I'm looking at a potential crisis in my household.
One public health expert tells me it could mean upwards of 700,000 people in the state could lose their Medicaid.
James, this is real life.
It's real life, and it's particularly damaging to rural America and particularly damaging to a lot of Trump's constituency. And by the way, when you lose a rural hospital, even if you're fortunate enough to have health care, if you don't have the hospital and you have a health emergency, you have a heart attack or something like that, it doesn't do you any good. And we're going to see vast numbers of rural hospitals close. We know that. That's all predicted. It's all baked in. They know that. And they tried to come up with a fund, a totally inadequate fund, to say, well, we put some money in there to help rural health. It is not adequate. This bill is unpopular, and the Democrats just don't need anything but just oppose and drag it out and just let this fish in the sun, and it's going to rot and smell. I promise you. There's no doubt about that.
It's also very fiscally irresponsible. You know, James, there are parts of politics that everyone's used to, and you say, well, this is how it is. And there are other parts where you say, can we just say once and for all, factually, I deal in facts, that you have Republicans in the current party, the recent party, and the MAGA-fied party that are very fiscally irresponsible. That's how they govern. They don't pay for things. It affects the economy, and they want to give tax cuts to multimillionaires and move the money towards the rich, but also set up a debt trap. Now, we have elections. People can say whether that's good or bad, but that's the facts. And so I'm curious. I want to show you how long this campaign has been going. You know, my job is to show people the facts and they make up their own mind. But to do that, we have to cut through the propaganda of how long there has been these lies, Republican leaders saying they don't want to do exactly what this bill does, which is grow the debt. We have the tape.
Most troubling of all, the unsustainable trajectory of government spending is accelerating our nation toward a ruinous debt crisis.
I'm very worried about the debt.
The single biggest threat to our country, both in the short term and the long term. We now have a debt of $16.4 trillion.
The real problem here is the debt and the lack of a credible plan to deal with the debt.
The dangerous addiction to deficit spending.
You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution.
James?
Well, not only does it add, it's according to the CBO and other private analysts, it's almost unanimous. They come in at $3.3 trillion. I don't know how to get there, but they all get to the same place. So we're going to cut veterans. We're going to cut health care. We're going to cut the weather service. We're going to close hospitals. We're going to do all of these things. In addition to that, we're going to pay $3.3 trillion in added debt. Now, I don't have to explain to anybody that this is very inflationary. Because when you add this kind of debt, what happens is interest rates go up. I'm sorry, the cost of money is inflationary. The interest rates are the most damaging part of the cost. We just saw what happened in your hometown in New York City, where the cost of living took issues front and center. This can be argued that this is going to increase. It's not only going to cut services for ordinary Americans, which it's going to do manifestly, it's going to increase costs for ordinary Americans, and it's almost a straight line. It really can't be disputed. I don't think there's an economic argument against that. I really don't. So, yeah, there's a lot to work with here. It's going to take a lot of discipline and a lot of stick-to-itiveness to stay and remind people of what this is.
Yeah, I hear you on that. We got a couple more questions for you. One is, how many dogs do you have there?
Well, this is the Shenandoah County Symphony Orchestra.
You got two? How many you got?
I think there's about 4 or 5 out there.
Hey, all right.
And that doesn't count the goats and the chickens and everything.
James Carville has a lot of animals. It's a whole farm.